I'm Libby Casey, and my colleagues here at the Washington Post, Matea Gold and Drew Harwell, have spent 4 months tracking the origins of Ivanka Trump's clothing. What's the supply chain, where it comes from? Thanks, guys, for talking about your reporting with us. So why is this so complicated? Because I'm looking at this Ivanka Trump, what is this, a skirt?
Blouse.
Blouse? Oh, it's a oh, there are the armholes. Okay. Blouse, and it says it's made in India. So what gives? Why is it so complicated?
Yeah, I mean, we all sort of recognize these garments. We know the made in China tag or made in India tag, but after that, the clues sort of get kind of cold. You can't really track it to which factory it is unless the supplier or the clothing brand like Ivanka's tells you where it starts. It gets into being a very non-transparent process, and it's really hard to know what the conditions are like for workers or where it even comes from. So beyond that tag and beyond the little information that the clothing company can give you, it's really difficult to sort of find these things, and that was our main mission, to sort of go into how can we know that these things are being made in a place that's good for the workers and being made to conditions that Americans want to see.
So we all have a lot of fast retail in our lives, clothes that are made and bought at cheap prices. They're made overseas. I checked what I was wearing today, and I'm wearing clothes made in Vietnam and China. So Matea, why is it important to look at the Ivanka brand in particular?
So we decided to focus on Ivanka because, one, she's a fascinating character in President Trump's administration, and there's a lot of focus on her political point of views and whether she's going to be an influence on him politically. One thing that's gotten less attention is her business background, the fact that she's been an entrepreneur herself and continues to own this business while serving in the White House as a senior advisor. And that business has issues that are implicated by President Trump's Buy American agenda.
We will follow 2 simple rules: buy American and hire American.
We thought it would be interesting to look at how much Ivanka Trump's company has tried to actually work with some of the policies laid out, the policy goals of the administration, and also what kind of oversight they have brought to their supply chain. One thing that Drew and I learned doing this project is that increasingly apparel companies are trying to have oversight of the factories where their goods are made so they can reassure consumers, like all of us, that people aren't being exploited in the process.
Like you point out, Adidas is one of those companies that's trying to track its own supply chain and tell people about the working conditions of their employees.
Exactly, and it's not just big companies like Adidas. We found a lot of smaller brands have made this sort of a central part of their mission, that we want you as consumers to know that we're keeping an eye on our overseas production. So we thought we would try to figure out exactly what kind of oversight the brand had and what were the conditions for the workers in the factory.
Give us a sense of where this clothing is coming from. What do we know?
This clothing comes from, we found 5 countries all around the world:
Wow.
China, India, Indonesia, Bangladesh, and Vietnam. These are countries that export a lot of the clothing that we buy and wear in the U.S. 97% of the clothing we wear and shoes is imported. So the supply chain depends on factories mostly across Asia for stuff like this. So you have the Ivanka shoes, you have the Ivanka handbags, Ivanka sort of electronics like this little USB battery, jackets, shirts, blouses. They all come from these factories that have different labor rights issues, have different wages, often very low wages, and different standards for how they treat the workers, how workers can survive on those kinds of conditions. So, it's important because Buy American, Hire American, it's the agenda that her father has set, and now that she's in the White House, it's the agenda that she's pushing as well. And yet there's a huge contrast between that and the reality of the modern clothing industry today that is so reliant and so dependent on factories overseas to make stuff at prices that we feel comfortable paying.
Okay, so Ivanka Trump still owns this brand, and that's important because even though she and her father have talked about separating themselves from the daily business that they've been involved with, she still ultimately sees the money from this company.
Correct.
She still has a vested interest for this to succeed. So you guys call up the Ivanka Trump line and you say, where's your clothing made, and what happens?
Yeah, so it was actually very interesting. They invited us up to Trump Tower, and we sat down with Abigail Clem, the president of Ivanka Trump's brand, who's now running it on a daily basis now that Ivanka Trump has removed herself from daily oversight. And they told us something really interesting, which is that because of this increased scrutiny that the brand is getting, they're actually were in the process of increasing oversight of their supply chain. So they're talking to a nonprofit group to possibly come in and provide some independent monitoring of the factories and try to come in and actually look to improve conditions.
But they still weren't saying to you, okay, here's the factory that we're contracted with in Bangladesh to make this jeans jacket. Here's what we know about the workers there.
No, and that's one thing where we really ran into a wall in our reporting, which is the company and its suppliers refused to disclose to us the factories where the goods are made. And so we were able to identify some of them through shipping records and customs records, but there is a big unknown mystery out there about where some of these products are being produced.
What do we know about a jacket like this that's made in Bangladesh?
So a jacket that's made in Bangladesh like this, you can see from the tag that that's the country where it comes from. There's another tag inside that lists sort of a number that can dovetail in with a company or supplier. But beyond that, that's it. So what we had to do was we used data from U.S. Customs records that track every shipment that comes in through every port in the U.S. on those big cargo ships that you see on the horizon when you're looking out on the water. And when they come in, they're tracked by the trademark, they're tracked by the goods that's been shipped. Some of those dovetail back to what shipper it was, what factory it was. A lot of them don't. A lot of them are put into bulk shipments where you sort of lose the scent. So it became following the evidence for us, following the customs records to the country or the factory if we could. And then also we went to a couple different data services that track not just customs data, but where the cargo ships are at every point along their voyage. So we can see, this ship is traveling from China to California. We know it's in the Sea of Japan right now or whatever. So it became, almost sort of a sleuthing process to track it back to what hands, were laid on these products to put them together. And it's a very complicated process. None of these things are made in just one factory alone. The fabric has to come from somewhere. The buttons have to be attached on at some point.
Even the buttons have the Ivanka Trump brand on them, so they're unique and
right. So these are signature buttons, right? There's a lot of skills that go into it, a lot of machinery. It's a very and that's just to make it. That doesn't even dovetail into how it comes to the U.S. And gets transmitted in this difficult process. So it's not easy, and a lot of the companies say we're not going to share with you what factory we use because that's an important part of our business. We don't want to necessarily give away something that could be competitive, but that prevents the consumers from really knowing, are the people who made this jacket being treated in the right way? Bangladesh especially is really interesting because it's a country that has one of the lowest minimum wages in the world. It also has a huge garment manufacturing industry, just second to China really. And workers there face really different conditions than here. They get paid a lot less money, but they also face sort of worker crackdowns for asking for higher wages. Some of the factory owners and even some of the government authorities will push back, arrest people who are asking for a wage boost. So when you see something like Made in Bangladesh, it says something. I mean, it says these are the conditions that these workers face, and also that this company chose to work there and to choose factories there that are going to build the Ivanka Trump brand.
What were you able to learn about the actual workers? And a lot of them are women who are making these garments, which is so interesting because Ivanka is really promoting a women who work agenda here in the United States and really around the world. She's very popular right now in China, popular in parts of Europe. What did you learn about the people who actually made these garments?
So it's fascinating because the garment industry internationally is overwhelmingly made up of women. And especially in some countries where we had reporters on the ground, like Indonesia, it's almost entirely women. And we heard some really interesting and compelling stories from these women. A lot of them see these jobs as a lifeline. They don't have a lot of other opportunities in poor regions. So there is an economic boost they get when factories open jobs to produce for American companies. But they also face really difficult working conditions sometimes where you have constant beratement from supervisors who are saying work faster, work faster. You have people who still are earning very, very low wages. One woman who spoke to us in Indonesia talked about how she makes the equivalent of about $173 a month, and she barely has enough to cover her rent in a one-room apartment. and she doesn't think she can save enough money to pay for her daughter's school fees, because in Indonesia you actually have to pay fees to go to elementary school, and she's a 2-year-old and doesn't know how she's going to actually pay her expenses. So while these jobs do offer opportunities, they do often also put these women in a situation where they feel like they're barely getting by.
And unfortunately, this is common throughout the garment industry, so it's certainly not unique to the factories that
Absolutely.
Ivanka Trump's clothing might be made in. Why is it significant to look at where hers are made? I mean, should she be held to any kind of different standard than other clothing companies?
I think the one standard that we have to hold her to is also as somebody who is pushing policy, who is representing the White House, representing the government in a way that she's traveling the world suggesting that family work-life issues are really important to her. She's called, caring about how women are treated in the workplace and their female empowerment as her life's mission. So it's important to see how she acts, when it comes to her business. But also, these companies have extraordinary influence over, how they want the workers to be treated, how they want workers to be paid, the conditions they're in, how safe they can be in these factories. So, there are companies, big and small, who do a lot more, we found, than the Ivanka Trump brand. Push a little bit more to ensure that their workers are not necessarily facing exploitation, not facing dangerous conditions. So, we have to ask if there were ways that maybe the Ivanka Trump brand could have improved, or questions they could have asked somewhere along the process. If they didn't ask them, why not? And if so, what does that mean about, the truth behind the Buy American agenda, or the truth behind sort of the Ivanka Trump kind of life mission? What does it tell us about the people who are running the country, and also, the factories that we buy from all the time?
And of course, all of us buy, like I said,
Totally.
clothes that are part of this fast fashion industry. So let's talk about who's wearing Ivanka's clothes. And where are these popular right now in the United States? We saw such a brouhaha when Nordstrom decided to drop her line a few months ago. We heard White House reaction to that. So Mateo, who's wearing these clothes?
So like anything attached to the name Trump, Ivanka Trump's brand has become a very polarizing topic, right? So what we found is that executives at the brand actually tell us revenues are up. They were up in 2016. They're continuing to go up this year. We found, talking to women across the country, that women who are fans of Ivanka and really believe that she is someone who's a role model they aspire to be like, are wearing her clothes as a political statement. There's now a trend of women posting selfies wearing Ivanka dresses and saying, using hashtags like adorable, deplorable. I mean, really embracing sort of the Trump political language and attaching it to her. I also spoke to a woman who said they see her as the best part of this administration. They see her as someone very relatable. She is someone who has given consumers a real window into her life on Instagram, posting pictures of her children, and that's something that a lot of women we spoke to really connected to. And so women like the fact that it's a price point that a lot of people can afford.
Like, let's talk about what we're
Yeah,
talking. Like,
so-
what are we talking about here?
So this is let's talk about maybe dresses are probably around $100 or $139. This jacket is about $100. And women feel like the cut is something that's flattering. I heard that a lot from people. So it's interesting because the actual image of the brand has shifted. When she started off her company, it was really about glamour and New York luxury, and it's now something that's really identified as something that Main Street can connect with, and those really appear to be the women who are flocking to buy her products.
Parts of the country where this brand has more popularity?
It's hard to say, but we did find a lot of women in red states who are buying her clothes and very proudly wearing them.
Ivanka Trump, like many salespeople, is selling not just a clothing line, but also a lifestyle. I mean, her new book that came out recently, Women Who Work, has a lot of sort of mottos and aphorisms in it about like how you can live your life and how to find your best success as a working woman. So what do we see in terms of the branding of these items?
Clearly it's resonating with people. Clearly it's resonating that here we have, a woman who has run her own business, who is a mother, who is traveling the world, who clearly has power, clearly very much on the spotlight. And the brand sort of follows in that lead.
Can I just read to you some of the label
Yeah,
here? So
please.
this says, be bold, act purposefully, embrace the future, respect the past.
Yeah, very aspirational.
Proof smart
almost
is sexy.
Sort of, greeting card. I mean, these are the things that people, when they go online and look at Pinterest and they want to feel inspired and empowered and want to take charge.
I mean,
as
this
Ivanka
charger
product
says, take charge on it.
They
which
may
is very
look to somebody like
cute.
Ivanka Trump. And they may
Hashtag
wanna,
Women Who Work is on all the garments.
That's right, yeah. So there's a passion there for that lifestyle, and goes into wearing the badge that says Ivanka Trump.
The marketing of her brand, I think, has been incredibly savvy, and they really tapped into this idea that there was a cohort of young women who were in the workplace who wanted to look glamorous without spending a lot of money, who wanted to identify with a young, glamorous mother. And so they've really captured that. And it's interesting, when Drew and I went to the Ivanka Trump brand offices in Trump Tower, we were remarking to ourselves that we sort of felt like we were in a live Pinterest board, because there were collages of her and some of these sayings and pictures of women in beautiful clothes everywhere. So there's a sort of a whole atmosphere even in the office that perpetuates the marketing of the brand.
Okay, so Ivanka Trump's book has statements in it like, we must fight for ourselves, for our rights, not just as workers, but also as women. So take us back to the company's response that you mentioned earlier, when you were asking them, like, where are these garments being made, and who are the women who are not as fortunate to be able to take charge of their lives, who are laboring in factories making Ivanka Trump clothing, or really any clothing that American consumers wear?
They said the opportunities that they've given to thousands of women all around the world cannot be, ignored. That by creating sort of a manufacturing process that goes all across the world, that they've allowed for jobs to be there for women who maybe are young mothers, they're seeking a job, they want to leave the village, they want to go into the city to get a job. And I think there is some truth to that. There's some truth to this supply chain being important for those. But they also acknowledge that there are some things that they haven't been doing that they want to do. They have suggested that they want to reach out to a workers' rights group or consultant to tell them ways where they've potentially been lagging behind other brands. So, they sort of acknowledge there are potential things that we could do to ensure that the women who are working for us are being treated in the way that we are hoping all of our customers are being treated. And that aspirational message has to, if it's going to work anywhere, it needs to work everywhere for them. They can't just be sort of reliant on women who are feeling like they have no influence in their workplace, that they're being paid too little, that they're being berated in the workplace, and be preaching a message of empowerment elsewhere.
Where does the story go from here? And what have you guys learned just on a personal level about where your clothing comes from and how this whole supply chain works?
One thing the reporting on the story drove home is that the American apparel industry is rooted abroad, and it is really all but impossible to bring it back in any large-scale way. In fact, Abigail Clem, the president of Ivanka Trump's brand, said that to us. So that really, I think, raises questions about how far President Trump can go in his Buy American agenda, at least when it comes to the apparel industry. I think it also really showed how far, in some ways, much of the clothing industry has come in dealing with supply chain issues since the sweatshop scandals we heard about involving companies like Nike, right, 20 years ago, 25 years ago. We were actually really struck by how far many of these companies go to inspect their own factories, to go in and have programs for workers. There's actually quite a bit of transparency now. And one of the things we heard from a lot of experts in this field is that consumers expect this now. I mean, this is a given. Most sophisticated consumers who are buying fashion have a sense of workers' issues, and they want to feel good about the clothes they wear, right? So brands are trying to give them some comfort in that area.
All right, Matea Gold covers influence in politics and money. Also, we're talking to Drew Harwell, who covers national business retail. Your beats combine perfectly together on this huge story. And you guys tracked workers in how many countries to report this?
3 countries. We talked to almost 20 workers. Wow. We were in 4 factories, talking to workers around 4 factories. We traveled across the country. We talked to people across the country. So it was a huge sort of endeavor going at this really complicated industry.
All just to get at this very simple question of where is this made and who made it?
Right, and there's still mysteries that we're hoping to unravel, particularly in Bangladesh, where we were not able to find the exact factories and confirm where her goods are made. And we've asked the brand and its supplier repeatedly, and they refuse to tell us.
All right, thank you, Matea. Drew, I'm Libby Casey. Thank you for watching.